Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CS School podcast. Now, this is the podcast where we speak with CS professionals from all over the world, learning about the hottest topics in customer success. And really, in this podcast, what we like to do is strip them right down to basics and discover how we can best apply these strategies in actual life. And today on the podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by Haig Kingston. He's the head of customer success at OpenBlend, and Haig is a returner. He is back on the podcast once again. He joined us last year to talk about value-led frameworks. This week, he's actually back to talk about redefining customer advocacy. And I think in this market, it's more important now than ever to actually really knuckle down on how we can make the best out of those customers who are, performing well. But before we crack on with it, Haig, thank you so much for joining me. Would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about what you've been up to since we last spoke?
Sure, and thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure to do these podcasts for the CSC. I'm a big advocate for what you guys do. So since we last spoke, I've moved to a business called OpenBlend, who are a performance management SaaS platform, whose purpose and vision is to transform one-to-ones to boost performance and develop people. Started as a principal, so I came in as a principal customer success manager in sort of around September time, I believe, and now work my way up to head of customer success. So driving the strategy and playbooks for the business going forward. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind 6 to 9 months, but looking forward to this discussion.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm really thrilled to have you back. You've recently been voted one of our CSCs 24 in 2024. You've done incredible things in the customer success community. And yeah, really excited to be chatting to you about this because advocacy, I think it's something that's on the tip of everyone's tongues at the moment, trying to do more with what you've already got in today's current climate. And we're going to be exploring really how redefining customer advocacy can transform those critical relationships and the outcomes. So really looking forward to talking to you today. Let's dive in. So I guess I'm quite curious to sort of really understand how you are at OpenBlend, you kind of go about defining advocacy and how you sort of tend to determine the right kind of advocacy or playbook for different customers because, not all customers are the same. Everybody has different needs. And, in our previous episode, actually, we chatted to Kimberly Ayala and we looked at segmentation. So obviously different customers have completely different needs. And in our chat before, when we were deciding what we were going to talk about in this episode, you mentioned you used a framework. And I'd really like to hear kind of how you, what this looks like. And if you could walk us through your advocacy playbook or framework.
Yeah, sure. It's really poignant timing because we actually launched this in January. I created it just before Christmas going into 2024, being that I think advocacy in customer success will be such a huge factor in terms of team performance, customer performance, and valued outcomes. So, I created this, as I say, just before Christmas. It's a framework whereby your customer advocates gain full control and value from participating. So they have a choice of what type of activity they want or can participate in. And that way it defines what my view is on advocacy, which is it's a partnership. We want to ensure that the customer are at the heart of their own success story. And we, as the CS team, will help bring that to life. So it sort of encapsulates 4 quadrants where we look at exposure, credibility, targeted, and control. And it's a framework that I kind of learned from previous businesses. And by looking at it in a 4-quadrant approach, we look at those targeted areas and we say to our customer, well, if they've been identified as a potential advocate, what would they like to do? And walking through that, it kind of breaks it down even further into what's in it for them, how we do it. So the what, the why, the how, and the where, because each different process or advocacy type will have different methods and different outcomes. So that's how we sort of launched it into 2024. But we want to help bring our customer stories to life and not only showcase that for us, but also internally for them. It's really important that they showcase the work they're doing.
Absolutely. Oh, it sounds fantastic. And I really like the fact you are reframing it and sort of putting the sort of agency into the customer's perspective, because essentially that's what's happened with sort of SaaS and software as a service with customers. The traditional consumer business relationship, it completely flips with software as a service, where a customer can, it's in their, the power's in their hands, where a customer can churn on it, and I like the fact that you're kind of actually bringing that back into that power back to the customer, because it's an incredibly important, really crucial part to nail right, advocacy. So and especially, I can imagine there are probably quite a few things that can go wrong with advocacy programs. The one that really pops into the front of my head is just actually getting your advocates to engage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any do you think, can you think of any particularly things that can go particularly wrong, or risks with advocacy programs, that if anyone's listening and who are thinking about rolling out an advocacy program, even with the best intentions, can you perhaps tell our listeners about some things they can maybe watch out for, and what to try and not do, essentially?
Yeah, I think that advocacy has always been perceived as one way, right? So you, as the organization, trying to gain advocates to build new business pipeline, to understand how we can continue to grow our customers and really showcase the great brands that you have. But it even goes as far back as advocacy being known as a favor. Oh, can you please do me a favor and write a case study? Well, actually, we need to make it more about our customers and not about our own business outcomes, because if we keep using that favor approach, it's not benefiting the customer in any way, which makes it harder to engage. And I think that if you were to position this playbook, so the framework, which the one that I've created, actually customer facing, we actually walk our customer through the process. And the reason why we built this framework is that they can have more control. And some teams or individuals or businesses will look at different areas. So, for example, some, for legal reasons, can't have a logo on your website, or can't have a conversation or build a case study because of branding or image rights, etc. So we're giving them a little bit more control as to what they can do. Whereas some organizations and some individuals within those organizations really want to self-promote, really want to put themselves forward into the limelight and help bring their industry to life, as to what they're doing, best practice examples. So I think for me, it's the things that can go wrong is that if you continue down that route of it's a one-way street and it's that favor approach, we need to move away from that, and we need to put the customer right smack bang in the middle.
Yeah, I completely agree, because it feels quite stale, the previous approach, doesn't it? Just by I guess it's actually a bit reactive, like how everything customer success is trying not to be, as a sort of you don't want your interactions with customers to feel like they're not really getting much out of it, because we talk about that throughout the whole customer journey, and it seems a bit daft to, at this crucial point where you've got a customer who's clearly engaged and clearly values the product, to then sort of undo that proactive work. Yeah.
It needs to be that partnership approach. It needs to be, we've identified an advocate and then we'll take them through the framework. What can and can't they do? What would they like to do? What are their goals for being a part of this advocacy framework as well? We've got to bring it back to full circle, and just trying to go away from that stale approach of please may do me a favor.
Yeah, it just feels a bit sloppy, doesn't it? Just being that,
it does.
If you've got a quick 5 minutes or something, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm really curious to learn a bit more about this partnership, because I don't think it's something that people talk about enough of. So you've mentioned how we need to reframe how advocacy is it's a two-way street, rather than just doing favors. But what, for anyone maybe still trying to get their head around how that actually looks like, what can you what does that partnership really kind of look like for you? I mean, how do you kind of, for example, you mentioned that it looks good for the customer to have obviously the brand on your site, an example, but how would you sell that to a customer who maybe is a bit on the fence about, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that advocacy is about the customer. Everything that we do
Yeah.
in customer success is about the
Mm.
customer. And I think I may have said it on a previous podcast or engagement that we've had, where the key to customer success is in the title itself, right? It's
Yeah.
your customer success, and it's the value that they've achieved from the excellent partnership that you have with them. We need to showcase their achievements, because by showcasing their achievements within your industry, within their own business, or even with our own customers and potential prospects, it goes so far, so much further than just a favor approach. And I think with the framework that I've created, is you can break it down into three main areas, which is what's in it for you. And we approach it in this way with our customer advocates, is what's actually in it for you. So it's for your brand, it's for your team, and it's for you as an individual, right? So if it's a brand approach, it's positioning your business as a thought leader and showcasing the success that you've had, and being that, certainly in our case, that people first organization. So it's expanding the awareness among other businesses in your industry to see that you're one step ahead. And if you're looking at it from a team approach, you want to showcase your team and their expertise in their field. It's an opportunity to network and share insights with other customers and other businesses about best practice and common challenges that you've overcome. And then you'll always have some that's around the individual. Boost personal brand within your organization, really showcase the work that you've done to your execs, or extend your professional network. So it's going away from just having, you as an organization having an advocate and they've done a case study, and really breaking it down, what's in it for them. You've really got to sell what's in it for them. And I think customer success is so more strategically minded now, that you have to break these barriers down and kind of really put a process that encapsulates the customer and what they gain out of it. So, for example, we use this framework where one of our customers actually use it for employee proposition, why they retain their staff, how they attract new staff. So that's what's in it for them.
Oh, thank you for that. That's a lot clearer. That's definitely something people should be doing more, and just not getting to like bad habits of just reaching out on like, oh, right, we need a case study, or we need this. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to just actually sort of go back a little bit to what you were talking to about your framework, your advocacy framework, and you were talking about different quadrants, right? You were talking about credibility, and exposure, targeting. Could you expand maybe a little bit more about those quadrants? Because I think I think that it sounds really, really interesting. And I guess how do companies navigate those trade-offs when they're planning an advocacy program?
Yeah, look, sure. It's and you'll hear this repetitively throughout this podcast, is making sure that customers are at the heart of their choice, right? It's enabling them to decide which program or process works best for them. So, for example, like we mentioned before about the customers that can't be named for legal reasons on websites, perhaps doing a peer-to-peer call provides them more control and is more targeted to them specifically. And some, however, which will take a front and center approach, will allow them to be in the spotlight. So high credibility, more exposure within their industry and peers, and sort of leading the way to valuable insight. Right. So kind of how I broke it down was, what type of advocacy processes do you currently do? So do you have quotations on your website? Do you engage with customers on a blog? Or do you offer logo on your website or case studies? And then breaking that down into the 4 quadrant or the 4 different silos, where you can look at that exposure, look at the control, and then visually share that with them and say, look, this is what we feel is right for you, but please tell me otherwise. And then it goes into that more detail. But I think if you're looking at high exposure, more exposure and high credibility, that's live events, that's webinars like this where you can really showcase what you're doing. Or if you're looking at the control and targeted, it's peer-to-peer calls, or it may be being part of your product council, or it could be a logo on a website. So there's a number of different ways. And I think the tip for anyone listening is really to identify what you do well in advocacy processes and position it within a customer-facing framework.
Oh, thank you so much, Haig. Perfect. I was just thinking also, what are the types of, I don't know, impact or benefits have you seen for brands you work with that, engage in different ways, like you said, like adding logos to websites, participating in case studies. Like, I guess what I'm trying to understand is, for those clearly engaged customers, but they might still perhaps be, busy and have, quite a low bandwidth. And, what are so let me rephrase that. Actually, I've kind of just gone off a tangent then. I guess I kind of want to know that, the impacts of, and the benefits really of putting there. Yeah.
I think that most importantly, I think for any CS team is 100% customer-led referrals. There's nothing more powerful than your customer stories being a point of reference for any prospective new businesses or, in contract growth with other customers, because they're hearing from like-minded individuals. So for me, the biggest benefit this year, I think, and going into maybe even to 2025, will be customer-led referrals, whether that's current customers or new prospects. I've been working with a really close contact of mine who's kind of stepped away from his CS role and kind of gone out on his own, and he 100% believes in customer-led referrals. And the work that CS does in advocacy is and could reshape the whole way CS is reported on, and it could actually be game-changing for customer success. Because if you look at a CS team now and they've got such intrinsic relationships with their customers, are we actually measuring how many customer-led referrals we're getting, whether that's in customer base and external prospect base? And look, if anyone wants to be put in touch with the chat, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to have a conversation. But he really believes in reshaping the way with advocacy metrics, because CS delivers so much in that area.
So do you think that's a bit of a blind spot at the moment for customer success teams sort of globally, or?
I don't necessarily think it's a blind spot, but I don't think it's being put in the spotlight as much as it should. And, I take from my own experience in my CS career, where my customers have referred that, or us as an organization, to another customer in its industry or with peers. And certainly with OpenBlend, we're very much customer referral based. And it's, how can you measure that? And how can you put that spotlight on the CS team? Because that is your biggest growth opportunity within an organization.
I was just thinking that, how would you measure that? Because I'm assuming that it'd be really banking on the customer, the new revenue, the new customer, to kind of sort of, when you have those drop down menus and things like that, saying hear about us word from mouth, is that
measuring the advocacy, isn't it? Measuring the advocacy and saying that they're an advocate of your organization. They're going out and doing industry-led events where they're putting you and themselves in the spotlight. Can only mean good things for your organization.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's a really good point, really salient point. And I guess finally, I'd like to sort of understand a little bit more about what advice, and I think this is something I quite like to sort of end the podcast episode on, is sort of, really talking about practical advice. But what advice would you give to any customer success teams to make advocacy programs more structured, more formalized, versus, like we mentioned earlier, rather than your ad hoc request, which, like we said, feels a bit stale. It feels a bit not quite sort of, it's not undermining the good work that you've done before, but to have a bit more structure to these processes. I mean, you've done something similar, this year, haven't you? OpenBlend, but what advice would you give then?
I think there's a couple of things. Take a step out of that swim lane of the stale approach of can you do me a favor? Put yourself out of that comfort zone and really engage with the customer and put them at the center of everything that you do, because giving them the flexibility and the choice to say what they would like to do makes it more controllable, and it will allow putting in a framework where you can actually bring your customer into that framework, allows you to take that control. It allows you to track advocacy a lot closer, but be specific on the outcomes and give the customer the full control over their story. Really break it down into sharing their story, what's in it for them, and actually how do you do it? Because it can be the simplest things where, the customer doesn't understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you do it, and where you do it. Okay. So really maybe take a shift out of that swim lane and come away from that archaic old-fashioned way of asking for a favor and really engage with your customer about advocacy and take them through your framework. Take them through it and see if they've got any feedback or questions, how would they like to engage, because we can consistently learn and develop what our frameworks, but we've got to make sure the customer's right at the center of that.
Oh, terrific. Thank you so much, Haig. That's perfect.
My pleasure.
And I'm sure this is going to help a number of different people because, like you said, things are hard at the moment. And you really need to sort of really hone down on those customers that are engaged, and really making sure that customer referrals. It just seems like something that CS should be measured way more on, because it's such an important part of the process.
Absolutely. And if the listeners want to touch base or make contact, I'm more than happy to help where I can and maybe go into a little bit more depth, but certainly open to that.
Oh, that'd be brilliant. I'll share your LinkedIn details in the show notes of this podcast. You're also in the CSC Slack channel as well. You're an ambassador. So I'm sure lots of people will be wanting to learn a little bit more about this, especially since your recent success. So thank you so much. That's all we've got time for, I'm afraid, today, Haig. But thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to have you back. Like I said, you're one of our 24 in 2024. So a real, real pleasure to sit down and have a chat with you. But thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much, Haig. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to check out our other episodes and go to customersuccesscollective.com for even more customer success related content. You can also join our global community on Slack, and you can find the link to that on the CSC website. But until then, see you next time.